Elena Moretti stood frozen outside her husband's study, her hand still gripping the doorknob she'd never quite turned. Through the crack, Victor's voice drifted out, calm, businesslike, as he discussed the exact date of her death. The pregnancy test in her purse, the one that had filled her with confused hope just an hour ago, suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Because the men in that room were laughing about how easy it had been to fake it. Her empire, her body, her entire life. All of it had been a transaction she never agreed to. And the worst part? She'd loved him through every lie. If you want to see how a woman becomes the monster they should have feared from the start, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets that October evening, the kind of Boston downpour that turned the cobblestone streets slick and treacherous. Elena Moretti pressed herself against the limestone wall outside the townhouse, her coat soaked through, her breath coming in short bursts that had nothing to do with the cold. She shouldn't have been there. She was supposed to be at her sister's place in Cambridge, sitting through another dinner where Maria would ask pointed questions about why Elena looked so tired, why she'd lost weight, why her hands shook when she thought no one was looking. But Elena had forgotten her medication. The little white pills Victor left on her nightstand every morning, the ones that were supposed to help with her nerves. Dr. Hammond had prescribed them 6 months ago, right after the dizzy spells started. Victor had been so attentive then, making sure she never missed a dose. So she'd driven back through the storm, let herself in through the side entrance, dripped water all the way up the servants' stairs to their bedroom. The pill bottle had been exactly where it always was. She'd been on her way back down when she heard voices from Victor's study. That room was supposed to be empty. Victor had told her he'd be at the office until midnight, working on the merger with the Castellano group. He'd kissed her forehead that morning, told her to rest, reminded her about the pills. But that was definitely his voice. And someone else's. Marco, maybe. Victor's head of security, the man with the scar across his left eye, and hands that looked like they'd broken more than a few things. Elena knew she should leave. Should take her pills and drive back to Maria's and pretend she'd never come home at all. Instead, she moved closer. The study door was heavy oak, original to the 1890s townhouse. Normally it's sealed tight, but someone had left it open just a crack. Maybe an inch. Just enough. The timing has to be perfect. Victor's voice, crisp and certain. He always sounded like that when he was working through a problem. Elena used to find it attractive, that confidence. Any earlier and the inheritance clauses don't trigger. Any later, and the board might start asking questions. What about the sister? Marco's gravelly rumble. Maria's been sniffing around, asking Elena if she's feeling all right, if she needs anything. Maria is irrelevant. She has no legal claim to Moretti shipping, and once Elena's gone, the company transfers to me as surviving spouse. We've been over this. Elena's vision blurred at the edges. The pill bottle slipped from her fingers, but she caught it before it hit the floor. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it again. And the pregnancy? A third voice, one she didn't recognize, younger, uncertain. What if someone wants to verify? There is no pregnancy. Victor said it like he was commenting on the weather. Dr. Hammond confirmed the HCG injections worked perfectly. Elena's been showing all the right symptoms for 8 weeks now. Morning sickness, fatigue, the emotional volatility. By the time anyone thinks to question it, it won't matter. The floor seemed to tilt under Elena's feet. 8 weeks ago, she'd woken up nauseous, barely made it to the bathroom in time. Victor had been so concerned, so gentle, as he'd held her hair back. He'd driven her to Dr. Hammond himself, waited in the reception area while the doctor ran tests. She'd cried when Hammond told her she was pregnant, cried because she'd wanted it so badly and been afraid it would never happen. Cried because maybe, finally, she and Victor would have the family she'd always dreamed about. The kind of family her parents had been before the accident that took them both. Victor had held her that night, stroked her hair, whispered that everything was going to be perfect now. The pills keep her manageable? Marco again. More than manageable. Docile. Between the sedatives and the hormones, she barely knows what day it is half the time. It's actually made things easier. Someone laughed. Elena thought it might have been the younger voice. She really has no idea? Elena has never had any idea about anything. Victor's tone shifted, took on an edge of contempt that made Elena's chest tighten. That's what made her perfect. sweet, trusting Elena Moretti, barely 24 years old, orphaned at 22, left with a shipping empire she had no capacity to run. All those board members, all her father's old partners, they were circling like sharks. She needed someone to take care of her, someone to make the hard decisions. "And you were happy to volunteer," Marco said. "I was practical." Enzo Moretti spent 40 years building that company. His daughter was going to lose it all within 6 months. The marriage was mutually beneficial. "Except she thinks you love her." "Elena thinks what I need her to think. She's been thinking it for 2 years now. 2 years of playing the devoted husband, and in 3 weeks, it pays off." Elena's back hit the wall. She didn't remember moving, but suddenly she was sliding down, her legs giving out, the pill bottle finally tumbling from her grip and rolling across the hardwood floor. It didn't make a sound. Nothing made a sound except the rain hammering against the windows and her own heartbeat roaring in her ears. 3 weeks, the younger voice repeated. "You're sure about the method?" "Car accident," Victor said. "She's been on those pills for months. Her reaction time is shot. All it takes is a rainy night, a sharp turn on Storo Drive, maybe a little mechanical failure. Marco's people can handle the details." And if the investigation, there won't be an investigation. Elena Moretti, pregnant and unstable, loses control of her vehicle during a storm. Tragic. Heartbreaking. I'll be devastated naturally. The press will eat it up. Shipping heiress dies in tragic accident. Husband vows to honor her legacy. I'll have Moretti shipping consolidated under the Moretti Castellano umbrella within a month. The Castellanos are on board? Antonio Castellano has been on board since the beginning. This whole thing was his idea, actually. He wanted access to the Atlantic routes. I wanted the company. Elena was the key to both. The younger man whistled low. Cold. "Business," Victor corrected. "Nothing personal." Elena pressed her hand over her mouth, afraid she might throw up, afraid she might scream, afraid of the sound that wanted to claw its way out of her throat. Nothing personal. 2 years. 2 years of marriage, of sleeping beside him, of believing his touches meant something, his words meant something. 2 years of trying to be the wife he seemed to want, quieter, softer, less involved in the company her father had bled for. And all of it, every single moment, had been a setup. The pregnancy wasn't real. The baby she'd been imagining, planning for, wasn't real. The pills she'd been taking religiously, trusting that they were helping her, those weren't helping at all. They were part of it, making her easier to manage, easier to kill. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks before Victor put her in a car and made sure she never got out. "When do we move the documents?" Marco asked. "Tomorrow. I need Elena's signature on the updated will, the one that names me primary beneficiary and executor. She'll sign it. She signs everything I put in front of her these days." It was true. Elena couldn't remember the last time she'd actually read something before signing. Victor always explained that it was routine paperwork, estate management, boring legal necessities, and she'd trusted him. She'd been so tired, the pills making everything fuzzy, and it had been easier to just smile and sign where he pointed. She'd signed away her own life and hadn't even known it. "What if she doesn't?" the younger voice asked. "Sign, I mean. She will, but if she doesn't, we have alternatives. The timeline gets messier, but it still works. One way or another, Moretti shipping becomes mine before the year is out." Elena's fingers found the pill bottle where it had rolled against the baseboard. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands. The label said lorazepam, anxiety, as needed for panic attacks. But she'd never had panic attacks before 6 months ago. She'd been handling the company transition, managing the grief of losing her parents, dealing with the pressure from the board. She'd been stressed, yes, but functional. Then Victor had suggested she see someone. Dr. Hammond, a personal friend, someone who could help. And the pills had started, and the fog had rolled in, and Elena had disappeared piece by piece until she barely recognized herself in the mirror. "She's upstairs right now?" the younger voice asked. "No, dinner with her sister. She won't be back until late." Victor's chair creaked. He was standing up. "Which gives us time to go over the Castellano contracts one more time. Antonio wants to make sure we're aligned on the route divisions once the merger is complete." Footsteps. They were moving toward the door. Elena pushed herself up, her legs unsteady, her whole body shaking. She moved fast, faster than she'd moved in months, back toward the servants' stairs. Behind her, she heard the study door open fully. "Marco, make sure the car's ready. We're meeting Antonio at the club in an hour." "Yes, sir." Elena made it to the landing, pressed herself into the shadows. Below, she heard them moving through the house, Victor's footsteps confident and familiar, Marco's heavier tread behind him. The front door opened and closed. An engine started in the driveway. Then silence. Elena waited, counted to 100, then 200. When she was sure they were gone, she walked back downstairs on legs that didn't feel like her own. She went to the study, pushed the door open all the way. The room smelled like Victor's cologne and old leather. His desk was massive, mahogany, covered with neat stacks of papers and a laptop that was probably password protected. The walls were lined with books he'd never read and photographs from their wedding. Elena, in white, smiling like she believed in fairy tales. Victor beside her, his hand on her waist, his smile perfect. She looked at that photo for a long moment. Then she opened the desk drawers. The first 3 were locked. The 4th wasn't. Inside, she found file folders labeled with company names she recognized: Moretti Shipping, Castellano Group, several others that meant nothing to her. She pulled them out, spread them across the desk. Revenue projections, merger timelines, route acquisitions. And there, at the bottom of the stack, a folder labeled EM, Estate. Elena opened it. Inside were documents she'd signed over the past 6 months. New will, power of attorney, transfer agreements, page after page of her own signature, every one of them legally binding, every one of them stripping away her control piece by piece. And at the very bottom, a document she hadn't signed yet, the one Victor had mentioned, the final will, the one that made him sole inheritor of everything. There was a sticky note attached. Have E signed by October 15th. Today was October 8th, 1 week. He'd been planning to get her signature within 1 week. Elena sank into Victor's chair, the leather still warm from where he'd been sitting when he discussed her murder. She stared at the documents, at her own signatures, at the life she'd thought she'd been building. It had all been a lie. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered promise. The way he'd proposed at her parents' funeral told her she didn't have to face the world alone. The way he'd taken over the company meetings when she was too overwhelmed to think straight. The way he'd convinced her that the pills were helping, that Dr. Hammond was a good doctor, that everything was going to be fine. Lies. All of it. Elena's hands had stopped shaking. She noticed it suddenly, the tremor that had been constant for months, the one that made her feel weak and uncertain, was gone. She looked down at the pill bottle in her palm. Then she stood up, walked to the bathroom attached to Victor's study, and dumped every single pill into the toilet. She watched them swirl and disappear, flushed them away like they'd tried to flush her away. Her reflection in the mirror looked different, sharper. The fog was already lifting, or maybe it was something else. Maybe it was the fact that she finally understood exactly where she stood. Dead woman walking. That's what she was. Had been for months, maybe longer. But she wasn't dead yet. Elena went back to the study, pulled out her phone, and took pictures of every document in that folder. Every signature, every clause, every piece of evidence that Victor had systematically stolen her life. Then she put everything back exactly as she'd found it. By the time she was done, her hands were steady and her mind was clearer than it had been in half a year. She locked the study door behind her, went upstairs to the bedroom she shared with her husband, and packed a small bag. She took clothes, cash, her passport, left behind the jewelry Victor had given her, the credit cards tied to accounts he controlled. She took her mother's wedding ring, the one piece of her parents she'd kept close. And she took the bottle of prenatal vitamins that had been on the nightstand, the ones Dr. Hammond had prescribed for the pregnancy that didn't exist. Elena stood in the doorway of the bedroom, looked back at the life she was leaving. The king bed with its silk sheets, the walk-in closet full of clothes Victor had chosen, the vanity where she'd sat every morning, swallowing pills that made her compliant. She'd been so stupid, so trusting. Not anymore. Elena turned off the lights and left. She drove to a hotel across the city, paid cash for a room, and didn't turn on her phone. She sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel it all. The betrayal, the rage, the bone-deep terror of how close she'd come to dying without ever knowing why. Then she opened her laptop and started searching for a name. Adrian Keller, Victor's rival. The man who'd been trying to acquire Moretti Shipping before Victor had swooped in with his marriage proposal. The one Victor had outmaneuvered, embarrassed, beaten. If anyone wanted to see Victor Moretti fall, it would be Adrian Keller. Elena found his company website, Keller Maritime, headquartered in New York. Import-export, shipping routes throughout Europe and Asia. Smaller than Moretti Shipping, but growing. She found his email address buried in a press release from 3 years ago. And then, at 2 in the morning, with rain still battering the hotel windows and her whole world reduced to ashes, Elena Moretti wrote an email to a man she'd never met. Mr. Keller, my name is Elena Moretti. My husband is planning to kill me in 3 weeks and steal my company. I have proof. If you're interested in destroying him, meet me tomorrow. I'll tell you everything. E.M. She hit send before she could second-guess it. Then she lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and waited for her old life to finish dying. By morning, Adrian Keller had responded. The message was short, just an address in South Boston and a time, 2 p.m. Elena showed up early. The warehouse was exactly the kind of place she'd have been terrified to enter a week ago. Crumbling brick, broken windows, the smell of salt water and rust. She parked her car in the empty lot, grabbed the folder of photographs she'd printed at a 24-hour copy shop, and walked inside. Adrian Keller was waiting in what must have once been an office. He stood with his back to her, looking out a window that overlooked the harbor. Mrs. Moretti. He didn't turn around. You're either very brave or very desperate. Both, Elena said. That made him turn. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car, and he looked at her like she was a puzzle he was planning to solve. You said you have proof. Elena dropped the folder on the rusted desk between them. Everything. Documents showing how he's been moving assets, testimony from the doctor who faked my pregnancy, financial records linking him to the Castellano group. He's planning to make it look like an accident 3 weeks from now, maybe less. Adrian picked up the folder, flipped through it. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest, maybe, or calculation. Why come to me? Because you hate him, Elena said simply. Because he took something from you, and now he's taking everything from me. Because I did my research last night, and you're the only person with the resources and the motivation to help me. Help you do what, exactly? Destroy him. Elena's voice didn't shake. Take everything. His company, his reputation, his freedom. I want him to lose it all, the same way he planned for me. Adrian set down the folder. And what do I get out of this? Moretti Shipping. Once Victor's gone and I have control back, I'll sell it to you. Half market value. You've wanted those Atlantic routes for years. You can have them. That's a very generous offer. It's a fair trade. You help me live. I give you what you've always wanted. Adrian studied her for a long moment. Elena forced herself to meet his gaze, to not look away, to not show the fear that was still there under the anger. You understand what you're asking for, he said finally. This isn't a simple corporate takeover. Your husband has connections. The Castellanos, for one. They're not going to let their investment walk away without a fight. I know. You'll have to go back. To the house. To him. Play the role of devoted wife while we build the case. Can you do that? Elena thought about the pills in the toilet, the fog lifting, the woman she'd been for 2 years, soft and trusting and half asleep. That woman was gone. Yes, she said, I can do that. Adrian smiled then, and it was the kind of smile that should have been a warning. Then we have a deal, Mrs. Moretti. Welcome to the game. He extended his hand. Elena shook it, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that she'd just traded one devil for another. But that was a problem for later. Right now, she had a husband to fool and a life to save. The planning took 3 days. Adrian worked fast, methodical. He had resources Elena hadn't anticipated, lawyers, investigators, people who could dig up information that should have been buried. Within 48 hours, they had more than just Elena's photographs. They had bank statements showing Victor's gambling debts from before the marriage, emails between him and Antonio Castellano discussing the Moretti situation, a paper trail of the HCG hormone purchases that had faked her pregnancy symptoms. Dr. Hammond, it turned out, wasn't even a licensed therapist. He was a physician's assistant who'd lost his license in New York for prescription fraud. Victor had been paying him cash for 2 years. "Your husband is sloppy," Adrian said during one of their meetings. They'd moved from the warehouse to a private office in his building, sleek and modern and nothing like the dusty spaces where Elena had spent the last few days. "Arrogant. He assumed you'd never question him." "I didn't," Elena said quietly. "Not until I heard him planning my death." "That's going to change." Adrian slid a small box across the desk. "Your new phone, encrypted. Use it to contact me, no one else. Your regular phone stays on, stays active. Victor can't know you've gone dark." Elena pocketed the phone. "What about the signature he needs, the will?" "You're going to sign it." "What?" "We need him confident. If you refuse, he'll know something's wrong. He'll move up the timeline or change tactics. But if you sign, if you play the role perfectly, he'll think he's won. That's when people get careless." Elena's stomach twisted. The idea of signing that document, of putting her name to her own murder contract. "I know it's hard," Adrian said, and his voice was surprisingly gentle. "But it's strategy. We're not letting him kill you, Elena. We're letting him think he can. There's a difference. And if something goes wrong, if he moves faster than we expect, then you call me." Adrian's eyes locked on hers. "Anytime, day or night. You're not alone in this anymore." It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a new kind of trap closing around her. But Elena nodded, because what choice did she have? She went back to the house that night. Victor was in the study when she arrived, paperwork spread across his desk. He looked up when she entered, and his face shifted into that smile she used to think was warm. "Elena, I was starting to worry. Maria said you left her place hours ago." "I went for a drive." Elena kept her voice soft, uncertain. The old Elena. "Needed to clear my head." "Are you feeling all right? You look pale." "Just tired. The baby—" She caught herself, let her hand drift to her stomach in that unconscious gesture she'd been doing for weeks. "I think I need to lie down." Victor stood, came around the desk, put his hands on her shoulders. Elena forced herself not to flinch. "You've been pushing yourself too hard," he said. "I keep telling you to rest." "I know. You're right." She leaned into him, let him pull her close, breathed in the cologne she used to love and now made her want to scream. "I'm sorry I'm so much trouble." "You're not trouble." He kissed the top of her head. "You're my wife. Taking care of you is what I'm supposed to do." The lie came so easily to him, so smooth. Elena pulled back, managed a weak smile. "I should take my pill. I forgot this morning." Something flickered across Victor's face. Approval, maybe. "I left them on the nightstand. Make sure you eat something first." "I will." She went upstairs, locked herself in the bathroom, and dry heaved over the toilet until her ribs hurt. Then she splashed water on her face, stared at her reflection, and reminded herself 3 weeks. She could do this for 3 weeks. She dumped the pill down the sink, flushed it away like all the others, and went back downstairs to play the role of her life. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in deception. Elena smiled when Victor wanted her to smile. She signed the will when he brought it to her, hand shaking just enough to seem authentic, and watched his satisfaction as he filed it away. She attended dinners with the Castellanos, sat quietly while Antonio and Victor discussed shipping routes and profit margins, played the doting wife who didn't understand business. At night, she met with Adrian. They compiled evidence, built the legal case, identified every person in Victor's network, every account he'd hidden, every lie he'd constructed. Adrian's lawyers drafted documents that would strip Victor of everything the moment Elena gave the word. "The timing matters," Adrian explained during one late-night session. "We move too early, he lawyers up and drags this out for years. Too late, and you're dead. We need the perfect moment." Which is? When he thinks he's won. When his guard is completely down. Elena understood. It was the same logic Victor had used on her. Lull the target into complacency, then strike when they're not looking. She was becoming like him. The thought should have horrified her. Instead, it felt like power. "There's something else," Adrian said one night, a week before Victor's planned accident. They were in his office again, the city spread out below them through floor-to-ceiling windows. Something I need you to understand. What? When this is over, when Victor's destroyed and you have your company back, you can't run it. Elena went still. What are you talking about? You're 24 years old. You have no experience, no training. The board barely respects you now, and that's with Victor pulling strings. Once he's gone and the scandal breaks, they'll tear you apart. So what am I supposed to do? Just hand everything over to you? That was our deal. The deal was I'd sell to you, not that I'd roll over and disappear. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her. You've changed since that first day in the warehouse. You're sharper now. I stopped taking the pills that were turning me into a zombie. Of course I'm sharper. It's more than that. He stood, moved to the window. You're angry. Good. Use it. But don't let it blind you to reality. Moretti Shipping needs someone who knows what they're doing. That's not you. Not yet. The words stung because they were true. Elena had spent 2 years being decorative, being managed, being the heiress who signed where she was told. She knew nothing about running a shipping empire, but she could learn. After, she said, after Victor's gone, I'll think about it then. Adrian turned, and something in his expression made her uneasy. Fair enough. They went back to the planning, but the moment stayed with her. The reminder that even with Victor destroyed, she'd still be trading one form of control for another. But first things first, she had to survive. The night before the planned accident, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed next to Victor, listening to him breathe, wondering if he was dreaming about her funeral, about the press conference he'd give, the tears he'd fake, the empire he'd claim. At 3 a.m, she got up and went downstairs. The house was quiet, dark. She stood in the kitchen, staring out at the garden her mother had planted years ago, now overgrown and wild. Her phone buzzed, the encrypted one. You ready for tomorrow? Adrian, Elena typed back, as ready as I'll ever be. Remember, you're in control. He thinks he's hunting you. He has no idea you're the one setting the trap. She put the phone away and went back to bed. Victor stirred when she slid under the covers. Can't sleep? No. Elena let her voice shake, let herself sound scared. I keep having bad dreams. About what? Dying. Victor pulled her close, and she felt him smile against her hair. You're not going to die, Elena. I promise. The lie was so casual, so easy. Elena closed her eyes and counted the hours until it would all be over, one way or another. The morning came too fast. Elena woke to Victor already dressed, adjusting his tie in the mirror. He caught her watching and smiled that smile she now recognized as performance. Big day, he said. The Castellano contracts are being finalized. I should be done by 6, then we can have dinner, just the 2 of us. That sounds nice. Elena sat up slowly, playing fragile. I have that appointment with Dr. Hammond at 2. Right, the checkup. Victor crossed to the bed, kissed her forehead. Call me after. Let me know how you and the baby are doing. The baby that didn't exist? The appointment that was probably part of whatever documentation he needed for the accident report. Elena nodded, watched him leave, listened to his footsteps on the stairs, the front door closing, his car pulling away. Then she grabbed the encrypted phone. Adrian answered on the first ring. He just left? Yes, he thinks I have a doctor's appointment at 2. Perfect. That gives us the afternoon. Marco's already moving. We've got surveillance on him. The moment he makes contact with the mechanic, we'll have everything we need. Elena's hands tightened on the phone. And if something goes wrong? Nothing's going wrong. Trust me. Trust. Such a broken word now, but she didn't have a choice, so she got dressed and drove to the office building where Adrian was waiting. Not his usual place, somewhere neutral, a lawyer's office in the financial district. The kind of place with security cameras and witnesses. Adrian was already there when she arrived, along with 2 other people she didn't recognize. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and sharper suit, and a younger man with a laptop and the look of someone who spent his life buried in data. Elena, this is Margaret Chen, my lead attorney, and Paul Reeves, forensic accountant. Adrian gestured to chairs arranged around a conference table. They're going to walk you through what happens next. Elena sat. Her stomach was tight, her pulse hammering, but she kept her face calm. Margaret spoke first. We've built a comprehensive case against your husband. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. The evidence is substantial, but we need to be strategic about how we deploy it. What does that mean? It means we can't just hand this to the police and hope for the best. Victor has connections. The Castellanos have deeper ones. If we move through normal channels, things get buried. Evidence disappears. Witnesses change their stories. So what do we do? Paul opened his laptop, turned it so Elena could see the screen. Financial statements, transaction records, a web of connections that made her head spin. We go public, he said, not with law enforcement, with the board of directors at Moretti Shipping. We expose Victor in front of the people who matter most to him, his peers, his business partners. We destroy his credibility before he has a chance to spin the narrative. And then? Then he has nothing left to lose, Margaret said bluntly, which makes him dangerous, which is why we need you somewhere safe when this happens. Elena shook her head. No, I need to be there. I need to see his face when he realizes what I've done. Adrian leaned forward. Elena, I need to be there, she repeated, harder this time. This is my company. My life he tried to steal. I'm not hiding while you handle it. The room went quiet. Margaret and Paul exchanged glances. Adrian watched Elena with an expression she couldn't quite read. All right, he said finally. You're there. But you follow our lead, you don't improvise, and the moment things get unstable, you leave. Agreed? Agreed. Margaret pulled out another folder. Then let's talk timeline. The board meeting is scheduled for next week. Emergency session called by you in your capacity as majority shareholder. Victor doesn't know about it yet. How did you? I called it, Adrian said. Using proxy votes I've been acquiring over the past 6 months. Minority shareholders who were unhappy with Victor's management. It wasn't enough to control the company, but it was enough to demand a meeting. Elena stared at him. You've been planning this for 6 months? I've been planning this since the day your husband stole what should have been mine. Adrian's voice was flat, matter of fact. Your situation just gave me the perfect opening. There it was. The reminder that this wasn't altruism. Adrian wanted Victor destroyed for his own reasons, and Elena was the weapon he'd been waiting for. But she'd known that from the start. What about today? She asked. Victor thinks I'm going to be in a car accident tonight. Let him think it. Paul pulled up another screen, showed her what looked like traffic camera footage. We've got eyes on Marco. The moment he makes contact with the mechanic who's supposed to sabotage your car, we document everything. Then tonight, you don't drive. You take a car service, one of ours. If Victor asks you weren't feeling well, didn't want to risk it with the baby, he'll be suspicious. Maybe. But he's arrogant enough to think he still has control. One more day won't change his plans. It'll just make him recalibrate. Elena wanted to believe that. Wanted to trust that Victor's arrogance would be his downfall. But she'd trusted him once before, and look where that had gotten her. The meeting lasted another hour, going over details and contingencies and backup plans. By the time Elena left, her head was pounding and her hands were shaking again. Not from the pills this time, but from the weight of what she was about to do. She drove back to the house, parked in the driveway, sat in the car for a long moment before going inside. The house felt different now, like a museum of her own stupidity. Every room held a memory that had been rewritten. The kitchen where Victor had held her after she'd gotten the fake pregnancy news. The bedroom where he'd whispered promises he'd never meant. The study where he'd planned her death. Elena went upstairs, changed into comfortable clothes, and waited. At 6:30, Victor came home. She heard the front door, his footsteps, the sound of him moving through the house, looking for her. She stayed in the bedroom, sitting by the window, staring out at nothing. Elena? He appeared in the doorway. You all right? Just tired. She didn't turn around. The appointment ran long. Everything okay with the baby? Dr. Hammond says everything's fine. Just need to rest more. She felt rather than saw Victor relax. Heard him cross the room, felt his hand on her shoulder. I'm glad. I worry about you. The lie was so easy for him, so natural. Elena turned, looked up at him, and let her eyes fill with tears. I love you. You know that, right? Victor's expression softened, or maybe it just shifted into a different mask. I know. I love you too. He pulled her up, held her close, and Elena closed her eyes and thought about all the ways she was going to watch him fall. I'm not feeling well enough to drive tonight, she said into his chest. Can we just order in? Of course, whatever you need. Perfect. Exactly what Paul had predicted. They ordered Thai food, ate in the living room, watched a movie Elena didn't pay attention to. Victor kept checking his phone, probably waiting for word from Marco that the job was done, that her car was ready to fail at exactly the wrong moment. But the message he was waiting for wouldn't come. Because Marco was being followed, documented, recorded. Every text, every phone call, every movement adding to the mountain of evidence that would bury Victor. At 10, Elena faked a yawn. I should go to bed. I'll be up soon. Just need to finish some emails. She went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, pulled out the encrypted phone. Status? She texted Adrian. The response came immediately. Marco made contact at 4:47 p.m. Mechanic confirmed for payment. We have video, audio, financial transaction. It's done. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, staring at those words. It's done. She had proof now. Undeniable, concrete proof that her husband had paid someone to kill her. The relief should have been overwhelming. Instead, she just felt cold. Board meeting is set for Friday, Adrian's next message read. 3 days. Can you hold it together that long? 3 days of pretending. 3 days of sleeping next to a man who wanted her dead. 3 days of playing the role she'd perfected over 2 years. Yes, she typed back. I can do 3 days. Good. Get some rest. You're going to need it. Elena put the phone away, changed into pajamas, slid under the covers. An hour later, Victor came to bed. He wrapped an arm around her waist like he always did, pulled her close like he actually cared. Elena lay there in the dark, eyes open, and counted down the hours until Friday. The next 3 days blurred together in a strange, suspended reality. Elena moved through the house like a ghost, playing her part with a precision that surprised even her. She smiled when Victor smiled. She ate the meals he suggested. She took the fake prenatal vitamins and pretended to rest while he worked. And at night, after he fell asleep, she met with Adrian's team. They rehearsed her statement for the board meeting, practiced her delivery, her timing, the exact moment when she'd present the evidence that would destroy her husband. Margaret coached her on staying calm, on not letting emotion override strategy. He's going to react, Margaret warned, probably badly. He might try to turn it around on you, claim you're unstable, bring up the pills you were taking. You need to be ready for that. I am ready. Are you? Adrian's voice cut through the room. Because the moment you walk into that boardroom, there's no going back. Victor will know you betrayed him. The Castellanos will know. You'll be painting a target on your back that doesn't go away just because we win. Elena met his eyes. I already have a target on my back. At least this way I'm the one holding the gun. Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Approval, maybe? Or recognition. Just don't miss, he said. Thursday night, Victor came home late. Elena was in the study when he arrived, sitting at his desk, going through the company files he'd left out. She'd been doing it every night this week, relearning the business her father had built, the empire she'd let slip away while she'd been drugged into compliance. Elena? Victor stood in the doorway, surprise clear on his face. What are you doing? Reading? She looked up, kept her voice light. I realized I don't actually know anything about the company anymore. I thought I should change that. Victor moved into the room slowly, like he was approaching something unpredictable. You should be resting. The baby's fine, and I'm tired of being useless. Elena stood, gathered the files. My father spent his whole life building this company. I should at least understand what he built. For a moment, something crossed Victor's face. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first whisper of suspicion. Then he smiled. Of course. I think that's great. I can help you, if you want. Explain some of the more complicated aspects. That's okay. I'd rather figure it out myself. She walked past him, files in hand, and felt his eyes on her back the entire way upstairs. That night, Victor didn't sleep. Elena could feel him lying awake beside her, could sense him thinking, calculating, trying to figure out if something had changed. Let him wonder, she thought. Let him feel a fraction of the uncertainty he'd put her through. Friday morning arrived with cold rain and gray skies. Elena dressed carefully. A navy suit her mother used to wear, the one piece of professional clothing she'd kept from before the pills and the fog and the careful dismantling of her identity. She pinned her hair back, minimal makeup, pearl earrings. She looked like Elena Moretti, shipping heiress. Not Elena Moretti, decorative wife. Victor was already downstairs when she came down. He took one look at her and frowned. "You look nice. Do you have plans today?" "Board meeting," Elena said casually, pouring coffee. "Emergency session, didn't I tell you?" Victor went very still. "No, you didn't." "Oh, well, it was last minute. Some of the minority shareholders called for it. Something about quarterly projections." She sipped her coffee, watching him over the rim. "I'm sure it's nothing important." "Who called the meeting?" "I don't know. Margaret Chen reached out to my office yesterday, said it was urgent." Victor's jaw tightened. "Margaret Chen is Adrian Keller's attorney." "Is she? I didn't know." Elena set down her coffee. "Should I be worried?" "No, of course not." But Victor was already moving, pulling out his phone, stepping away. She heard him making calls, his voice low and sharp, trying to figure out what was happening. Elena finished her coffee, grabbed her bag, and headed for the door. "Elena," Victor caught her arm. "I'm coming with you." "You don't need to—" "I'm coming." His grip was tight enough to bruise. Elena looked down at his hand, then up at his face, and saw something new there. Not the mask, not the performance. Fear. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's go together." They drove in silence, Victor's knuckles white on the steering wheel, Elena staring out the window at the rain-soaked streets. The Moretti shipping headquarters loomed ahead, glass and steel, her father's legacy made physical. The boardroom was on the top floor. Elena had been there exactly once since her father's death, for the meeting where Victor had been named acting CEO. She'd sat quietly in the corner while men twice her age had made decisions about her inheritance. Not this time. The room was already full when they arrived. The board members, most of them men in expensive suits who'd known her father, who'd watched her grow up. Antonio Castellano, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, sitting at the far end of the table, and Adrian Keller standing by the windows watching the city below. He turned when Elena walked in, and their eyes met for just a second. Then she took her seat at the head of the table, her father's seat, and watched Victor's face as he realized where this was going. Margaret Chen stood. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. This meeting has been called by Elena Moretti, majority shareholder and rightful CEO of Moretti Shipping, to address serious concerns about company management and fiduciary responsibility." Victor was already on his feet. "This is inappropriate. Elena isn't in a position to—" "I'm in exactly the position I should be," Elena said, and her voice didn't shake. "This is my company, my father's company, and I have evidence that you've been systematically defrauding it for 2 years. The room erupted. Board members talking over each other, Antonio Castellano's face going dark, Victor's voice cutting through the chaos. "This is insane. Elena, you're not well. You've been under stress with the pregnancy. There is no pregnancy." Silence dropped like a guillotine. Elena stood, pulled out the folder she'd been carrying, and slid copies across the table. "Victor has been paying an unlicensed physician to inject me with hormones that simulate pregnancy symptoms. The goal was to make me appear emotionally unstable, easier to manipulate, and eventually easier to eliminate." "That's a lie." Victor's voice was steel. "Elena has been on medication for anxiety, prescribed by a legitimate doctor. Dr. Stephen Hammond lost his medical license in New York 3 years ago for prescription fraud." Margaret's voice cut through. "We have documentation of cash payments from Victor Moretti to Hammond dating back to the month after the marriage. We also have recordings of Victor discussing his plans to kill his wife and claim her inheritance." She pressed a button, and Victor's voice filled the room. "Car accident. She's been on those pills for months. Her reaction time is shot. All it takes is a rainy night, a sharp turn, maybe a little mechanical failure." Elena watched the color drain from her husband's face. Elena Moretti, pregnant and unstable, loses control of her vehicle during a storm. Tragic. Heartbreaking. Antonio Castellano stood abruptly. "Where did you get this?" "From the man himself," Adrian said, "in his own study, planning murder like it was a quarterly review." Victor turned on Elena, and the mask was completely gone now. What was underneath was cold and calculating and furious. You recorded me? You went behind my back? You were planning to kill me. Elena's voice was quiet, but it carried. You faked a pregnancy, drugged me into compliance, and scheduled my death like a business meeting. So yes, I recorded you. I documented everything. And now everyone in this room knows exactly what you are. You have no idea what you've done. Victor's hands were shaking. The Castellano deal, the merger, is based on fraud and murder, Margaret interrupted, which makes it void, which makes everyone involved potentially liable for conspiracy. Antonio's eyes narrowed. This is a setup. Keller orchestrated this whole thing. I didn't have to orchestrate anything, Adrian said. Victor handed me everything I needed the moment he decided to murder his wife instead of just divorcing her. I'm just here to watch it burn. The room devolved into shouting, board members demanding answers, Antonio and Victor trying to regain control, Margaret calmly presenting more evidence, bank statements, emails, transaction records. And through it all, Elena sat at the head of the table and watched her husband's world collapse. It took security to finally clear the room. Victor was escorted out, still shouting, still trying to spin the narrative. Antonio Castellano left without a word, his phone already to his ear, probably calling lawyers. The board members filed out in shocked silence, each one avoiding Elena's eyes, until it was just her, Adrian, and Margaret. Well, Margaret said, closing her briefcase. That went about as expected. Elena's hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crash hitting hard. What happens next? Police investigation. Fraud charges. Attempted murder. Victor will try to fight it, but the evidence is overwhelming. He'll probably take a plea deal to avoid trial. And the company? Returns to you. Full control, effective immediately. The board will try to fight it, but legally, they don't have a leg to stand on. Elena nodded, tried to process that. Her company, her legacy. Finally, hers again. But the victory felt hollow. Margaret left, promising to call with updates. Adrian stayed, standing by the windows again, looking out at the city. You did well in there, he said. I wasn't sure you'd hold it together. I wasn't sure either. But you did, and now you have everything you wanted. Elena looked at him, at the satisfaction in his expression, and felt something cold settle in her chest. What do you want, Adrian? He turned, met her eyes. What we agreed on. Moretti shipping. Half market value. And if I say no, then you're running a company you don't know how to run with a board that doesn't respect you, and enemies who now know you're willing to destroy anyone who crosses you. Victor made a lot of friends, Elena. Friends who won't appreciate what you just did. So I'm supposed to just hand it over? Let you take what my father built? Not hand it over. Sell it. For a very generous price. And in return, I provide the expertise and protection you're going to need to survive what comes next. Elena's jaw tightened. You planned this. From the beginning. You weren't helping me survive. You were positioning yourself to take over. I was doing both. Adrian moved closer. You needed me. You still need me. This isn't over, Elena. Today was just the opening move. And what if I want to make my own moves? Then you'll lose. He said it simply, like it was fact. You're smart. You're ruthless when you need to be, but you're not ready for this world. Not yet. The words stung because they were true. Elena had managed to destroy Victor, but only because Adrian had given her the tools. Without him, she'd still be the drugged, compliant wife waiting to die. But she was learning fast. I'll think about it, she said. Adrian smiled. That's all I ask, for now. He left her alone in the boardroom, surrounded by her father's legacy and her own uncertain future. Elena looked out at the city, at the rain still falling, and wondered if she'd just traded one cage for another. Elena didn't go home that night. The house she'd shared with Victor felt contaminated now, every room holding memories that had been rewritten into lies. Instead, she checked into a hotel downtown, the kind of anonymous place where nobody asked questions, and the front desk took cash without blinking. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her mother's navy suit, and stared at her phone. 17 missed calls from Victor's number, 12 from numbers she didn't recognize, 3 from Maria, her sister. Elena had forgotten to tell Maria any of this was happening. She called back. Elena? Oh, thank God. Maria's voice was tight with panic. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. What the hell is going on? I got a call from some reporter asking about Victor and fraud charges, and it's complicated." "Complicated?" "Elena, they're saying your husband tried to kill you." Elena closed her eyes. "He did." Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "I'm coming to get you." "Where are you?" "Maria, I'm fine." "Where are you?" Elena gave her the hotel address. 20 minutes later, Maria was pounding on the door. Her sister looked exactly like their mother had. Same dark hair, same sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at Elena and pulled her into a hug so tight it hurt. "You should have told me," Maria said into Elena's hair. "You should have called me the second you knew." "I couldn't. I didn't know who to trust." "Me. You trust me." Maria pulled back, gripped Elena's shoulders. "Always me. You understand?" Elena nodded, feeling something crack in her chest. She'd been holding it together for weeks, playing roles, performing strength. But Maria was real. Maria was safe. She told her sister everything: the study, the recording, the fake pregnancy, the pills, Adrian's involvement, the board meeting, Victor's face when his world collapsed. Maria listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every detail. "That son of a bitch," she said when Elena finished. "I'm going to kill him myself. The police have him. Margaret says the charges are solid. And this Adrian Keller, you trust him?" Elena hesitated. "I need him." "That's not what I asked." "No, I don't trust him. But he helped me when no one else would." Maria's jaw tightened. "At what price?" "The company. He wants to buy Moretti Shipping." "Absolutely not." "Maria, that company is Dad's legacy, our legacy. You didn't survive Victor just to hand everything over to another man who wants to use you." "I don't know how to run it. Victor was right about that much." "Then you learn." Maria grabbed Elena's hands. "You're 24, not dead. You've got time to figure it out. And you've got me. I might not know shipping routes, but I know business. And I know when someone's trying to play you." Elena wanted to believe her. Wanted to think she could actually do this without Adrian's protection, without trading one form of control for another. But the doubt was still there, whispering that she was in over her head. "Stay with me tonight," she said instead. "I don't want to be alone." Maria nodded. "I'm not going anywhere." They ordered room service, ate bad pasta, and drank worse wine, and for a few hours, Elena let herself just be someone's little sister again. Not a widow, not a CEO, not a woman who'd just destroyed her husband's life. Just Elena. At midnight, Maria fell asleep on the other bed. Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what came next. Her phone buzzed. The encrypted one. "Adrian. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office." Elena stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Fine." She didn't sleep. By morning, the news had exploded. Elena's phone, the regular one, was flooded with notifications. News alerts, social media mentions, messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. The story was everywhere. Shipping heiress exposes husband's murder plot. Boston CEO arrested for fraud and attempted murder. Moretti marriage built on lies and deception. Someone had leaked the recording, not the full thing, but enough. Victor's voice, calm and cold, discussing her death like it was a business transaction. Elena sat in the hotel bathroom scrolling through articles, watching her life become public property. "You okay?" Maria stood in the doorway, coffee in hand. "They're calling me brave." Elena's voice was flat. "Courageous. A survivor, like I had a choice." "You did have a choice. You could have run. You chose to fight." "I chose revenge." "Same thing sometimes." Maria handed her the coffee. "What time is your meeting with Keller?" 10. "I'm coming with you." "Maria, non-negotiable. You're not facing that man alone." Elena didn't have the energy to argue. She showered, changed into fresh clothes Maria had brought from her apartment, and let her sister drive her to Adrian's building. The office was exactly as she remembered, sleek, modern, designed to intimidate. Adrian was waiting in the conference room along with Margaret and another man Elena didn't recognize. Older, maybe 60. with the kind of face that had seen everything and been impressed by none of it. "Elena, and you must be Maria." Adrian stood, offered his hand. Maria ignored it. "Let's skip the pleasantries. What do you want?" Adrian's smile was cold. "Direct. I like that. This is James Rutherford, former CEO of Atlantic Maritime. He's agreed to consult on the transition." "What transition?" Maria's voice was sharp. "The sale of Moretti Shipping to Keller Maritime, as Elena and I discussed." "Elena isn't selling." Adrian's eyes flicked to Elena. "Is that true?" Elena looked at her sister, then at Adrian, then at the man who was supposed to help smooth over the transfer of her father's legacy to someone else. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I need time to think." "You don't have time." Adrian's voice hardened. "The story is out. Every reporter in Boston is digging into your family's business. Your board is in chaos. Your investors are panicking. You need stability, and you need it now." "What I need," Elena said quietly, "is to understand what I'm actually giving up." Margaret spoke up. "Moretti Shipping is worth approximately $200 million at current market value. Adrian's offer is $100 million, half price as agreed." "That's $100 million you're leaving on the table," Maria said. "That's $100 million she gets to keep her life with," Adrian countered. "Without my help, Victor would have killed her. This is the price of survival. This is extortion. This is business." Elena stood abruptly. "I need to see it, the company. I need to understand what I'm actually deciding about." Adrian frowned. "You've been to the headquarters. I've been to the boardroom. I've sat in meetings where men talked over me. I haven't actually seen what the company does, the ships, the routes, the people who work there. I want to see all of it before I make a decision." "That could take weeks." "Then it takes weeks." Elena met his eyes. "You said I don't know how to run this company. Maybe you're right, but I'm not signing it away until I at least know what I'm signing." Silence filled the room. Margaret looked at Adrian. Maria looked at Elena with something like pride. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying Elena like she was a puzzle that had just reshuffled itself. "1 week," he said finally. "I'll give you 1 week to tour the operation, talk to the staff, understand the business. After that, we finalize the sale." 2 weeks. 1 week, Elena. That's the offer. Elena wanted to push harder, but she could see the line she couldn't cross. Adrian had been patient so far, but patience had limits. 1 week, she agreed. Adrian stood. "James will coordinate the tour. He knows the industry better than anyone. Use him. Learn fast." The meeting ended with handshakes Elena didn't feel and promises she wasn't sure she'd keep. Maria drove her back to the hotel in silence, hands tight on the wheel. "You're actually considering it," Maria said finally. "Selling." "I'm considering not being an idiot. Adrian's right. I don't know what I'm doing." "So learn. That's what you just bought yourself time to do." 1 week isn't enough to learn how to run a shipping empire? No. But it's enough to figure out if you want to. Elena looked out the window at the city passing by. Somewhere in Boston, Victor was sitting in a cell, probably still trying to spin his way out of this. Somewhere else, the Castellanos were deciding how to handle the fallout. And everywhere, people were talking about her. The naive wife who'd outsmarted her husband. The heiress who'd taken back her empire. Except she hadn't taken it back. Not really. She'd just traded Victor's cage for Adrian's leash, unless she could figure out how to break free of both. The tour started the next morning. James Rutherford picked her up at 7, driving a car that looked older than Elena and probably cost more than most people's houses. He didn't make small talk, which she appreciated. Their first stop was the shipyard south of the city, where Moretti Shipping maintained its fleet. Elena had never been there. Victor had always said it was too dangerous, too industrial, not the kind of place for her. Now she understood that had been another lie, another way to keep her separate from the business that was supposedly hers. The shipyard was massive, cranes and containers, and ships in various states of repair. The air smelled like salt and diesel and rust. Men in hard hats moved with purpose, shouting to each other over the noise of machinery. James handed her a hard hat and safety vest. "Your father used to come here every week. Knew most of these men by name." Elena put on the vest, feeling like a fraud. I don't remember that. You were young, but they remember him, and they remember you. They walked through the yard, James pointing out different ships, explaining routes and cargo types and maintenance schedules. Elena tried to absorb it all, but it was overwhelming. A language she'd never learned, a world she'd been deliberately kept from. A foreman approached, an older man with a weathered face and kind eyes. Miss Moretti, good to see you here. Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't... Dan Callahan, I worked with your father for 20 years. He glanced at James, then back at Elena. We heard about your husband, about what he tried to do. I'm sorry you went through that. Thank you. Your father would have been proud, the way you handled it. Took guts. Elena's throat tightened. I don't know about that. I do. Enzo Moretti built this company on guts and stubbornness. Looks like you got both. Dan walked away before Elena could respond. She stood there, surrounded by her father's legacy made physical, and felt the weight of it pressing down. He's right, James said quietly. Enzo was stubborn as hell, refused to sell even when the market crashed in 2008, said Moretti shipping would outlast any downturn. Did it? Barely. He mortgaged everything, took on massive debt. Could have lost it all, but he fought through and the company survived. And now I'm considering selling it to Adrian Keller. James was quiet for a moment. Can I be honest with you? Please? Keller's a shark, smart, ruthless, patient. He's been circling Moretti shipping for years, waiting for an opening. Your marriage to Victor gave him one. Your escape gave him another. He'll take this company and strip it for parts. Keep what's profitable, sell off the rest. And if I keep it? Then you're in for the fight of your life. The board doesn't respect you. Half of them were Victor's people. The Castellanos are going to come after you for torpedoing their deal. And you're right, you don't know how to run this operation. Not yet. So I'm damned either way. Maybe, or maybe you're exactly what this company needs. Elena looked at him sharply. What does that mean? Your father built Moretti shipping on relationships. He knew his crews, his captains, his clients. Victor tried to turn it into a spreadsheet operation. Maximum efficiency, minimum humanity. The company's been dying under that approach, just slowly. You could change that, if you wanted to. I don't know how. Neither did your father when he started. He learned. So can you. They spent the rest of the day at the shipyard. James introduced her to captains and crew members, walked her through cargo manifests and shipping schedules. By the end of it, Elena's head was spinning with information she barely understood. But something else was happening too. A spark of something she hadn't expected. Interest. That night she went back to the hotel and pulled up everything she could find about Moretti shipping. Financial reports, industry analyses, competitor strategies. She read until her eyes burned and her brain felt like it was going to leak out her ears. Maria found her at 2 a.m, surrounded by papers and laptop screens. You need to sleep. I need to understand this. Elena, I have 4 more days, Maria. 4 days to figure out if I can actually do this or if I should just take Adrian's money and walk away. Maria sat down across from her. What does your gut tell you? My gut is terrified. Good. That means you're paying attention. Maria pulled one of the reports closer, scanned it. What's this? Third quarter earnings. We lost 2 major clients to competitors in the last 6 months. Victor was so busy planning my death, he let the actual business fall apart. Can you get them back? I don't know, maybe, if I knew what I was doing. Then let's figure it out. Maria grabbed her own laptop. I might not know shipping, but I know how to analyze a business. Let's break this down piece by piece. They worked through the night, Maria translating the financial jargon into language Elena could understand. By dawn, they had a clearer picture of what Moretti shipping actually was. Not the empire her father had built, but the struggling company Victor had left behind. It's salvageable, Maria said finally, but it's going to take work, real work, not just signing papers Adrian puts in front of you. I know. And you're going to need help, people you can trust. Who? Everyone on the board is either Victor's ally or scared of crossing the Castellanos. Maria was quiet for a moment. What about bringing in your own people? Clean house, build a new team. With what experience? I've been a decorative wife for 2 years. But I haven't. Maria met her eyes. I've been running the family foundation, managing investments, dealing with lawyers and accountants and board members who thought they could walk all over me because I'm young and female. Sound familiar? Elena stared at her sister. You want to come work for Moretti Shipping? I want to help you keep what's yours. If you decide that's what you want, what about the foundation? It practically runs itself at this point, and honestly, this is more interesting. Elena felt something shift in her chest. The isolation she'd been feeling, the sense that she was alone in this fight, started to crack. Okay, she said. If I do this, if I keep the company, you're in? I'm in. They shook on it, and Elena felt the first real flicker of hope since the boardroom confrontation. Maybe she could actually do this. The rest of the week blurred past in a rush of meetings and tours and crash courses in maritime shipping. James took her to the main office, introduced her to department heads and analysts and the people who actually kept the company running day to day. Some of them were supportive. Others were openly skeptical. A few were hostile, probably Victor's loyalists waiting for her to fail so they could say they'd been right all along. Elena took notes on everything. Who could be trusted, who needed to be replaced, which divisions were profitable, and which were bleeding money. On day 4, she met with the company's legal team. Margaret sat in, along with Maria, as Elena learned exactly what mess Victor had left behind. The Castellano contract is dead, the lead attorney explained, but they're threatening to sue for breach. They claim they invested resources based on promises Victor made. Can they win? Probably not, but they can drag it out, make it expensive and ugly. That's likely the point. Bleed you dry through legal fees until you settle. What would a settlement look like? 10 million? Maybe 15, plus giving them preferential rates on certain routes. Elena's stomach turned. That's extortion. That's business, the attorney said, echoing Adrian's words from earlier. What if we don't settle? Then we fight. It'll take years and cost almost as much as settling would. Either way, you lose money you probably can't afford to lose. Maria leaned forward. What if we go public with why the deal fell apart? Make it clear the Castellanos were complicit in fraud and attempted murder? The attorney's eyes widened. That's incredibly risky. The Castellanos have deep connections. They could retaliate in ways that have nothing to do with the legal system. So we're supposed to just pay them off? Reward them for helping Victor try to kill Elena? I'm saying you need to consider all the angles. Elena listened to them argue, feeling the weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. Every decision had consequences. Every path forward led through minefields. This was what running the company actually meant. Not just understanding shipping routes and cargo manifests, but navigating threats and politics, and people who wanted to use her or destroy her. She thought about Adrian's offer. $100 million. A clean exit. Someone else's problem. But then she thought about her father, building this company from nothing. About Dan Callahan and the other workers who'd spent their lives making Moretti Shipping run. About the satisfaction on Victor's face when he'd planned to take it all. We fight, she said. Everyone turned to look at her. We fight the Castellanos. We don't settle. We don't negotiate. We make it clear that I'm not Victor, and I'm not going to be intimidated. The attorney looked pained. Miss Moretti. Elena. And I understand the risks, but I'm not paying them a dime. If they want a war, they can have one. Margaret smiled, just slightly. Understood. We'll prepare accordingly. The meeting ended and Elena felt Maria's hand on her shoulder. That was either very brave or very stupid, her sister said. Probably both. Dad would have done the same thing. Elena hoped that was true. On the final day of her week, she met with Adrian. He was waiting in his office, looking as polished and unreadable as ever. Elena sat across from him, the contract for the sale of Moretti Shipping sitting between them like a landmine. So, Adrian said, what have you learned? That you were right. I don't know how to run a shipping company. But I can learn. And I want to try. Adrian's expression didn't change. That's a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Elena, be realistic. You've had 1 week. You think that's enough to understand an industry your father spent 40 years mastering? No, but it's enough to know I'm not ready to give up. Even if it means losing everything? I've already lost everything once. I survived that. I can survive this too. Adrian leaned back, studied her with those calculating eyes. You're more like him than I thought. Your father, I mean. Same stubborn streak. I'll take that as a compliment. It's not. That stubborn streak almost destroyed Moretti Shipping more than once. Enzo refused to adapt, refused to modernize. He ran the company on gut instinct and personal relationships, and it nearly bankrupted him. But it didn't. He held on. Barely. And you don't have the luxury of barely. You're starting from a position of weakness. Damaged reputation, hostile board, external threats from the Castellanos. You need strength, and you need it now. Then help me. Adrian's eyebrows rose. What? You said you'd give me 1 week to learn. I learned that I can't do this alone, but I also learned I'm not ready to sell. So instead of buying the company, help me run it. As what exactly? Consultant, advisor, whatever you want to call it. You know this industry. You've been trying to acquire Moretti Shipping for years. You must have ideas about how to fix what's broken. And in exchange? 20% equity, silent partner status. If the company succeeds, you profit. If it fails, you're positioned to buy the pieces. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Elena could see him running calculations, weighing angles, looking for the trap. That's not what we agreed to, he said finally. I know. But things have changed. I've changed. This is a better deal for both of us. How do you figure? Because if you buy the company now, you get a damaged asset with hostile employees and legal problems. But if you help me rebuild it first, you get a stronger company worth more than what you were planning to pay. Plus, you get to stick it to Victor even harder. Watch him rot in prison knowing his wife not only survived, but thrived. A smile ghosted across Adrian's face. You're learning. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Let me think about it. You have until tomorrow. After that, I'm moving forward with or without you. Elena stood, left the contract unsigned on the desk, and walked out before Adrian could see her hands shaking. She'd just gambled everything on the hope that she could become someone she wasn't sure existed yet. But she was done being the fragile wife, the decorative heiress, the woman everyone underestimated. Time to find out who Elena Moretti actually was. Adrian called the next morning before Elena had finished her first coffee. 25%, he said without preamble, and I want board representation. Elena's heart kicked into a faster rhythm, but she kept her voice level. 20%, and you can attend board meetings as an observer, no voting rights. 23, with advisory voting rights on major financial decisions. 22, advisory only, and you provide weekly consulting hours. In writing. A pause. Then Adrian laughed, low and genuine. You've been practicing. Maria's been coaching me. Do we have a deal? We have a deal. I'll have Margaret drop the papers. Elena ended the call and let herself feel it for exactly 10 seconds. The rush of victory, the terror of what she'd just committed to. Then she finished her coffee and got to work. The first month was brutal. Elena moved into her father's old office at Moretti Shipping headquarters, a corner space with windows overlooking the harbor. Victor's things were still there, his diplomas on the wall, his expensive pens in the desk drawer, a framed photo of their wedding that made Elena's stomach turn. She threw it all away. Every trace of him went into boxes that security hauled out like they were removing evidence from a crime scene. Then she brought in her own things, her mother's painting of the coast, her father's old compass, a whiteboard where she mapped out everything she was learning, connection by connection, until the office looked like a detective's war room. Maria took the office next door and immediately started tearing apart the company's financial systems. Within a week, she'd found 3 different accounts Victor had been siphoning money from, routing funds through shell companies that led back to the Castellanos. He stole almost $2 million over the past year, Maria reported, dropping a folder on Elena's desk. Documented, traceable, prosecutable. Send it to Margaret, add it to the charges. Already done. But Elena, this is going to make the Castellanos even angrier. They're going to see this as you coming after them directly. Good. Let them be angry. Maybe they'll make a mistake. Maria looked worried, but she didn't argue. She'd learned that once Elena made up her mind about something, pushing back just made her dig in harder. James Rutherford came in twice a week, teaching Elena the operational side of the business. How to read a cargo manifest, how to negotiate with port authorities, how to assess whether a route was profitable or a money pit. You're picking this up faster than I expected, he said one afternoon, reviewing her analysis of their European operations. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Most people take months to understand this stuff. You've got the basics down in weeks. The basics aren't enough. No, but they're a start. James pulled out another folder. We need to talk about your board problem. Elena had been dreading this conversation. Out of 12 board members, at least 6 were openly hostile to her leadership. They showed up to meetings, voted against every proposal she made, and spent the rest of their time whispering to reporters about how Elena Moretti was running her father's company into the ground. I can't fire them, she said. Not without cause. You don't need to fire them. You need to outmaneuver them. How? James explained the bylaws she'd never bothered reading, the voting procedures Victor had used to maintain control. There were provisions for expanding the board, for calling emergency sessions, for removing members who violated fiduciary duties. 3 of them are already on thin ice, James said. They've been accepting gifts from competitors, probably violating conflict of interest policies. You document it, bring it to the full board, force them to resign or face investigation. And the others? You give them a choice. Work with you or watch the company succeed without them. Once you prove you know what you're doing, most of them will fall in line. The ones who don't will leave on their own. Elena studied the names on the list, men who'd worked with her father, who'd watched her grow up, and apparently decided she was still a child playing dress-up in the big chair. I want them out, she said. All of them. Everyone who stood by while Victor destroyed this company. That's half your board. Then I'll replace them. I want people who actually care about Moretti shipping, not their own egos. You have anyone in mind? Elena pulled out her own list, names she'd been compiling over the past few weeks. Dan Callahan from the shipyard, 2 captains James had recommended, a supply chain expert Maria had found, an environmental consultant who specialized in sustainable shipping. None of them have traditional board experience, James noted. Neither do I. But they know this industry, and they care about the people who work here. That's what my father built this company on. That's what I want to get back to. James studied her for a long moment. You know, when you first asked me to help with the tour, I thought you'd last maybe 3 weeks before running back to Adrian's offer. I was wrong. You weren't the only one who thought that. Including you? Elena smiled slightly. Especially me. The board reconstruction took another month of careful maneuvering. Elena documented the conflicts of interest, built her case, and presented it to the full board in a meeting that lasted 4 hours and ended with 3 forced resignations and 2 members storming out voluntarily. The ones who remained looked shell-shocked. This is highly irregular, one of them said, an older man named Preston who'd been friends with Elena's father. Restructuring the board without proper notice. I gave you notice, Elena said calmly. I told you all a month ago that things were changing. You chose not to take me seriously. That was your mistake. She introduced her new board members, watched the old guard's faces as they realized she'd stacked the deck with people who actually knew what they were doing. People who wouldn't automatically side against her because she was young and female and supposed to be easy to control. This is still highly unusual, Preston said, but his voice had less bite now. So was my husband trying to murder me for my company? We're all just adapting to unusual circumstances. The meeting ended with Elena's proposals passing for the first time since she'd taken over. It felt like a victory, small but real. But victories came with prices. 2 days later, Antonio Castellano showed up at her office unannounced. Elena's assistant tried to stop him, but Antonio walked past her like she didn't exist, settling into the chair across from Elena's desk with the ease of someone who'd never been told no in his life. Miss Moretti, we need to talk. Elena didn't stand, didn't offer her hand. I have nothing to say to you. That's unfortunate because I have quite a bit to say to you. Antonio crossed his legs, perfectly at ease. You've made some very serious accusations against my organization. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. These are grave charges. They're also true. Victor was working with you to steal my company. I have the documentation. What you have is a recording of Victor Moretti making foolish statements while drunk on his own ambition. You have nothing connecting me to his actions. The bank transfers suggest otherwise. Antonio's eyes hardened. Bank transfers can be misinterpreted. Business relationships can be misconstrued. You're young, Miss Moretti. You don't understand how these things work. I understand that you helped my husband plan my death, so you could both profit from my inheritance. That seems pretty clear. If I'd actually wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Antonio said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. Victor was sloppy, emotional, overconfident. I advised against the entire plan, but he insisted he could handle it himself. Elena felt ice slide down her spine. You're admitting, I'm admitting nothing. I'm explaining reality. Victor failed because he underestimated you. I won't make the same mistake. Is that a threat? It's a business proposal. Antonio leaned forward. You're in over your head. Your board is in chaos, your reputation is damaged, and you're making enemies faster than you can count them. Let me help you. Help me? You just said if you wanted me dead, but I don't want you dead. I want the Atlantic roots, and you're in a position to give them to me. Not for free, obviously. I'm prepared to pay fair market value, sign a long-term contract, and provide the kind of political cover you're going to need when this whole mess with Victor goes to trial. Elena forced herself to stay calm, to think through what he was actually offering. Why would I do business with someone who helped my husband try to kill me? Because I'm the devil, you know. You. Because I have connections that can make your legal problems disappear or multiply, depending on my mood. Because in 6 months, when the board realizes you still don't know what you're doing, you're going to need allies. I can be that ally, or I can be your nightmare. Your choice. He stood, adjusted his cuffs, smiled like they'd just had a pleasant chat about the weather. Think about it. You have my number. Then he was gone, leaving Elena sitting alone in her office with her heart racing and her mind spinning. She called Adrian immediately. Castellano just made me an offer, she said when he picked up. What kind of offer? She explained the conversation, word for word. Adrian was silent for a long moment. He's trying to see if you're viable, he said finally. Victor thought you were weak. Castellano's testing whether that's still true. What should I do? Refuse. Publicly, if possible. Make it clear you're not playing his game. And if he retaliates, then we deal with it. But Elena, you can't show weakness now. Not to him, not to anyone. The moment you do, you're done. Elena ended the call and stared out at the harbor, watching ships come and go, carrying cargo and commerce, and the weight of her father's legacy. She was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of proving herself, tired of wondering if every decision was going to be the one that destroyed everything. But she couldn't stop. Stopping meant losing, and she'd lost enough. She drafted a response to Castellano. Short, professional, unmistakably clear. Moretti Shipping would not be doing business with the Castellano Group now, or in the foreseeable future. She sent it, then waited for the fallout. It came faster than expected. Within a week, 2 of Moretti Shipping's major clients canceled their contracts. No explanation, just standard termination clauses activated, and business relationships that had lasted years suddenly ending. Maria tracked down the connection. Both companies have loans from Castellano Financial Services. Guess who just called those loans due? He's choking off our revenue. He's making an example. Show everyone what happens when you say no to Antonio Castellano. Elena felt fury rise in her chest, hot and sharp. Can we survive losing those clients? Short term, yes. Long term, we need to replace that revenue fast or we're going to start missing payroll. Then we replace it. James, I need you to reach out to every contact you have. I want new clients, new routes, anything we can fill those gaps with. James looked doubtful. That's going to be tough. Word's getting around that Moretti Shipping is in trouble. People don't want to bet on a sinking ship. Then we show them we're not sinking. What's our strongest division? European roots. Always have been. Your father built those relationships himself, and they've held solid even through Victor's mismanagement. Then we double down there, offer incentives, better rates, faster service. Whatever it takes to prove we're not going anywhere. The scramble to replace the lost revenue consumed the next 3 weeks. Elena worked 16-hour days, taking meetings with potential clients who looked at her like she was a kid playing pretend, negotiating contracts with companies that tried to lowball her because they thought she was desperate. She was desperate, but she learned to hide it. Adrian helped more than Elena wanted to admit. He made introductions, vouched for her competence, occasionally showed up at meetings just to add weight to her presence. His reputation in the industry was solid, and having him in her corner made people take her more seriously. But it also made them talk. "Are you sleeping with him?" Maria asked one night when they were both too exhausted to filter their words. Elena looked up from the contract she was reviewing. "What?" "Adrian Keller. Everyone's talking about how much time you spend together. How he's always defending you, how he looks at you." "How does he look at me?" "Like you're a problem he can't figure out whether to solve or exploit." Elena laughed, bitter. "That's probably accurate. But you're not sleeping with him." "No. Why would you even ask that?" "Because Victor used to look at you the same way, and look how that turned out." The words hit harder than Maria probably intended. Elena set down the contract, rubbed her eyes. "Adrian's not Victor," she said quietly. "Are you sure? Or is he just better at hiding it?" Elena didn't have an answer. The contracts came through eventually. Enough to stabilize the company, to prove they could weather the Castellano attack. Elena announced the new partnerships at the next board meeting, watched the doubt in people's faces shift into something that might have been respect. "Good work," James said afterward. "You might actually pull this off." "Might?" "You're not out of the woods yet, but you're still standing. That's more than most people expected." Elena would take it. That night she went back to the house for the first time since the confrontation. She'd been avoiding it, staying at Maria's or working so late she just slept at the office. But there were things she needed, documents, personal items, closure maybe. The house felt haunted. Every room held ghosts of the woman she'd been, the wife who'd trusted blindly and paid for it. She moved through quickly, grabbing files from the study, clothes from the bedroom, her mother's jewelry box from the safe. She was about to leave when she noticed Victor's desk drawer, the one that had been locked before. Someone had broken it open, probably the police during their investigation. Inside was another folder, one she hadn't seen during her initial search. The label said, EM, Personal. Elena's hands shook as she opened it. Inside were photographs, her and Victor on their wedding day, but not the official ones. Candid shots, moments between moments. And in every single one, Victor was looking at the camera while Elena looked at him with such naked adoration it made her stomach turn. Below the photos were documents. Her medical records from Dr. Hammond, detailed notes about the hormone treatments, the sedative dosages, the psychological manipulation tactics, a timeline of how they'd planned to break her down piece by piece. And at the very bottom, a handwritten note in Victor's script. Insurance. If she ever gets smart enough to become a problem. Elena stared at those words, understanding flooding through her. Victor had documented everything, not to confess, but to use against her if she ever fought back. He'd been planning to claim she was unstable, that the hormone treatments were for legitimate medical reasons, that her accusations were the delusions of a mentally ill woman. He'd built a trap within a trap, and she'd almost walked right into it. Except Adrian had moved faster. The recording, the evidence, the public exposure, it had all happened before Victor could deploy his insurance policy, which meant Adrian had known, had understood Victor's playbook better than Victor himself. Elena gathered the folder, added it to the box of things she was taking, and left the house for the last time. She drove straight to Adrian's building. It was past midnight, but she knew he'd be there. He practically lived at the office. His assistant had gone home, so Elena walked right into his personal space unannounced. Adrian was at his desk, papers spread around him, looking up in surprise when she entered. "Elena, what?" She dropped the folder on his desk. "You knew about Victor's backup plan, the fake medical records, the insurance policy. You knew he was going to claim I was mentally unstable if I ever fought back." Adrian looked at the folder but didn't open it. "Yes." "How long have you known?" "Since before I met you. I've been tracking Victor for 3 years. I knew everything he was planning." Elena felt her world tilt again. 3 years? You've been watching this whole time? "I've been waiting. For the right moment, the right leverage. You gave me both." "I gave you..." Elena's voice cracked. "I came to you because I thought you were my only option." "But you'd already decided to use me, hadn't you? This whole thing, helping me, the partnership. It was all just another way to take down Victor and get what you wanted." Adrian stood slowly. That's not entirely true. Which part? The part where you've been manipulating me from the beginning, or the part where you let me think I had a choice? You did have a choice. You could have run, could have taken the money and disappeared. You chose to fight because you made it seem like the only option. Because it was the only option that let you survive with your dignity intact. Adrian's voice hardened. Yes, I knew about Victor's plans. Yes, I positioned myself to benefit from your situation. But I also kept you alive. I gave you the tools to destroy the man who was going to kill you. I helped you reclaim your company. That counts for something. It counts for you getting exactly what you wanted while making me think I was making my own decisions. You were making your own decisions. I just made sure you had the information you needed to make the right ones. Elena wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to feel anything other than this crushing sense of betrayal. Were you ever planning to tell me? Eventually, when you were strong enough to handle it. Don't! Elena's voice was sharp. Don't pretend this was for my benefit. You saw an opportunity and you took it. I was just the weapon you used. You're more than that. Am I? Or am I just another asset you're managing? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. In the beginning, yes, you were a means to an end, but you surprised me, Elena. The way you adapted, the way you fought back, the way you learned to play the game, I didn't expect that. Most people in your situation would have crumbled. And that changes what exactly? It changes everything, because now you're not just a weapon. You're a player, and that makes you dangerous. Elena stared at him, trying to understand if this was another manipulation or something approaching honesty. I don't trust you, she said finally. Good. You shouldn't. Trust is for people who haven't learned better. Then why should I keep working with you? Because you need me, and I need you. Because together, we're stronger than we are separately. Because like it or not, we're already tied together. You think the Castellanos see a difference between your company and my investment? We're targets together now. He was right. Elena hated that he was right. I want full transparency, she said. No more secrets, no more games. If you know something that affects me or my company, you tell me. Immediately. Agreed. And I want the partnership agreement revised. Equal voting rights on major decisions. You don't get to unilaterally make calls that impact Moretti shipping. Adrian smiled slightly. Now you're negotiating. I'll have Margaret draw up the amendments. Elena picked up the folder, held it against her chest like armor. I'm not your weapon, Adrian, and I'm not your asset. If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals. Equals. Adrian extended his hand. I can live with that. Elena looked at his hand for a long moment before shaking it. She didn't trust him, probably never would. But she was learning that trust wasn't necessary for survival. Power was. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Elena Moretti had some. The revised partnership agreement arrived 3 days later, and Elena read every word twice before signing. Maria witnessed it, then pulled her aside. You know this doesn't actually make you equals, right? Adrian's been playing this game his whole life. You've had 6 months. I know, but I'm learning fast. That's what worries me. Elena didn't ask what she meant. She already knew. The woman she was becoming, calculating, guarded, always looking for the angle, wasn't the woman she'd been a year ago. Maybe wasn't even someone she'd recognize. But that woman had almost gotten killed. This new version was still breathing. She'd take it. The next few months fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Elena ran the company with Maria's help and Adrian's occasional interference. The board meetings got smoother as her new members found their footing. Revenue stabilized, then started climbing. Slowly, painfully, Moretti shipping began to look like something her father might have been proud of. Victor's trial was set for early spring. Margaret kept Elena updated on the prosecution's case. Solid, overwhelming, almost certainly ending in conviction. Victor's lawyers were already talking plea deals, trying to negotiate down from attempted murder to fraud and conspiracy. They're offering 15 years, Margaret reported during one of their weekly calls. With good behavior, he could be out in 10. Elena's stomach turned. 10 years. Victor would be 45 when he got out. Still young enough to rebuild, to start over, to probably ruin someone else's life. What if we push for the full charges, make them take it to trial? Then you have to testify. Relive everything in front of cameras, with every detail picked apart by his defense team. They'll bring up the pills, claim you were unstable, try to make the jury doubt your version of events. But we have the recording, which they'll argue was obtained illegally, recorded without his consent in his private residence. A good defense attorney could get it thrown out, and without that recording, the case gets a lot weaker. Elena closed her eyes, felt the familiar rage building. So he might walk? He won't walk, but he might get a lighter sentence than he deserves. That's how the system works, I'm sorry. The call ended, and Elena sat in her office staring at nothing. After everything, the fear, the planning, the public destruction of Victor's reputation, he might still win in some small way. It wasn't fair, but she was learning that fair didn't exist. Only power did. She called Adrian. I want to make sure Victor stays in prison as long as possible. What would that take? Testimony. You go on the stand, tell the jury exactly what he did, make it impossible for them to see him as anything but a monster. Margaret says his lawyers will tear me apart. They'll try, but you're stronger than they think, stronger than Victor thought, certainly. Adrian paused. The question is whether you're ready for that fight. Elena thought about the woman who'd stood outside Victor's study, listening to him plan her death. That woman had been terrified, shattered, barely holding herself together. The woman she was now would burn down the courtroom if it meant watching Victor pay. Set up a meeting with the prosecutors. I'll testify. Elena, I'll testify, she repeated. And I'll make sure every person in that courtroom understands exactly what he is. The preparation was worse than she expected. Hours with prosecutors going over every detail, every moment, every piece of evidence. They made her listen to the recording again and again until she could recite Victor's words from memory. Elena Moretti, pregnant and unstable, loses control of her vehicle during a storm. Tragic. Heartbreaking. Each time she heard it, something inside her hardened a little more. Maria came to every session, taking notes, asking questions the prosecutors hadn't thought of. She was building her own case, her own understanding of what had happened. You know what I keep thinking about? Maria said one night, after a particularly brutal prep session. How long he must have been planning it. The pills, the fake pregnancy, the accident. That takes months of setup, maybe longer. What's your point? My point is he was planning your death before you even knew to be scared, before you had any reason to suspect him. That's not just evil, Elena. That's patience. And patience is terrifying. Elena knew where this was going. You think Adrian's the same. I think Adrian spent 3 years watching Victor destroy you, and he never stepped in until it benefited him. That's also patience, also terrifying. He helped me survive. He helped himself. You were just the method. Maria grabbed Elena's hand. I'm not saying walk away from him. I'm saying don't forget what he is. I haven't forgotten. But sometimes, late at night when she was working with Adrian on company strategy, or listening to him explain the politics of maritime shipping, Elena wondered if she was forgetting, if the partnership was becoming something else, something she didn't have a name for. Adrian was always professional, always appropriate, but there were moments, a hand on her shoulder during a difficult meeting, the way he looked at her when she made a particularly sharp business decision, the protective edge in his voice when anyone questioned her competence. It felt like something. Elena just wasn't sure what. She didn't have time to figure it out. The trial was coming, and she needed to be ready. The courthouse was packed when Elena arrived. Reporters everywhere, cameras tracking her every move. She wore black, a suit Maria had picked out, severe and expensive, and nothing like the soft pastels Victor used to choose for her. Margaret met her at the entrance. You ready? No, but I'm doing it anyway. The courtroom was exactly like she'd imagined from watching legal dramas, wood paneling, high ceilings, that weight of institutional authority pressing down. Victor sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit that should have made him look diminished, but somehow didn't. He met her eyes as she walked in, and for a second, Elena saw the man who'd held her while she cried about the fake pregnancy. The man who'd kissed her forehead and promised everything would be okay. Then she remembered his voice on that recording, and the moment shattered. The prosecution called her early in the trial. Elena took the stand, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. The assistant DA was a woman in her 40s named Chen, no relation to Margaret, who'd made her reputation prosecuting domestic violence cases. She walked Elena through the timeline gently but thoroughly. The marriage, the pills, the discovery and the study. Can you tell the jury what you heard that night? Elena took a breath. I heard my husband planning my murder. He was discussing the timing, the method, how to make it look like an accident. He talked about the fake pregnancy he'd engineered, the drugs he'd been giving me. He talked about it like, her voice caught, like I was a problem to be solved, not a person, just something in his way. And how did that make you feel? Terrified, betrayed, stupid for not seeing it sooner. The defense attorney objected to the emotion, but the judge allowed it. Chen continued, pulling out the details that painted Victor as calculating and cruel. Then came the cross-examination. Victor's lawyer was exactly what Elena expected. Expensive suit, practiced sympathy, the kind of man who probably told himself he was just doing his job. Mrs. Moretti, you were on several medications during your marriage, correct? Yes, medications my husband's accomplice gave me without proper licensing or oversight. But you took them voluntarily. I took them because my husband told me they would help with anxiety. I didn't know they were part of a plan to make me easier to control. Were you diagnosed with anxiety prior to your marriage? No. So the anxiety began after you married Mr. Moretti. Elena saw the trap. The anxiety began after he started drugging me. Or perhaps the stress of managing a major corporation while dealing with the loss of your parents created genuine mental health issues that required treatment? No. I was managing fine until Victor started poisoning me. The lawyer's expression shifted just slightly. That's a very dramatic characterization, Mrs. Moretti. Do you have any medical evidence that the prescriptions you received were inappropriate or harmful? Margaret stood. The prosecution has already submitted Dr. Hammond's testimony confirming the hormone treatments and sedatives were prescribed specifically to manipulate Mrs. Moretti's mental state. Dr. Hammond, who is facing his own criminal charges and may be testifying in exchange for leniency, the defense attorney countered. The back and forth continued for another hour. The defense tried to paint Elena as unreliable, emotionally unstable, possibly even delusional. They brought up the fact that she'd secretly recorded her husband, suggesting she'd been paranoid and suspicious before she'd overheard anything incriminating. Elena held her ground. Every insinuation, every attempt to twist her words, she pushed back. She wasn't the fragile wife anymore. She was the woman who'd survived, who'd fought back, who'd won. By the time she stepped down, she was shaking with exhaustion and fury. But she'd done what she came to do. The jury convicted Victor on all counts 3 weeks later. Attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy. The judge gave him 25 years with no possibility of parole for 15. Elena wasn't in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She was at the office, in a meeting about expanding their Pacific routes, when Margaret called with the news. 25 years, Margaret said. He'll be almost 60 before he's eligible for release. Elena thanked her, ended the call, and went back to her meeting. The victory felt distant, like something happening to someone else. That night she went to the harbor, the same place her father used to take her when she was young, before the company got too big and the responsibilities got too heavy. She sat on the dock watching ships move through the darkness and tried to figure out what she was supposed to feel. Relief? Vindication? Closure? She felt tired and alone. I thought I'd find you here. Elena turned. Adrian stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking less polished than usual, like he'd actually left work early for once. How did you know where I'd be? Lucky guess, this is where you come when you need to think. Elena didn't ask how he knew that. Adrian noticed everything. It was part of what made him dangerous. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a while, they just watched the water in silence. You won, Adrian said finally. Victor's in prison, the company's stable, the Castellanos have backed off. You did everything you set out to do. So why doesn't it feel like winning? Because you're realizing victory doesn't fix what got broken. It just clears space for you to figure out what comes next. Elena looked at him, at the man who'd helped orchestrate her survival while serving his own agenda. What comes next for you? Same thing as always, building the empire, making deals, staying 10 steps ahead of everyone else. And me? Where do I fit in that plan? Adrian met her eyes, and something shifted in his expression, something that might have been genuine. That's the problem, Elena. You don't fit. You're not supposed to be an equal partner. You're not supposed to challenge me, question me, make me reconsider my own strategies. But you do. All of it. Is that a complaint? It's an observation. He paused. I've been thinking about the partnership agreement, the equal voting rights, the transparency requirements. Most people would have taken the money and run, but you negotiated your way into actual power. That was smart. You taught me well. I taught you the basics. You figured out the rest yourself. Elena felt something warm in her chest, dangerous and confusing. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know what you've become. You're not the scared woman who showed up at that warehouse anymore. You're a threat. To your competitors, to the Castellanos, probably to me if I'm not careful. Should I be worried about that? About you deciding I'm too much of a threat? Adrian smiled and it reached his eyes. You should always be worried. Paranoia kept you alive this long. He stood, offered his hand to help her up. Elena took it, felt the warmth of his skin against hers, and wondered when this, whatever this was, had started feeling like more than a business arrangement. I have something to show you, Adrian said. At my office, if you're interested. Elena should have said no, should have kept the boundaries clear, kept the distance that had kept her safe. Instead, she followed him. Adrian's building was mostly empty at this hour, just security and the cleaning crew. They took the elevator to his floor, walked past the conference rooms where they'd plotted Victor's destruction into his private office. He pulled out a folder, handed it to her. Inside were property deeds, transfer documents, legal papers Elena didn't immediately understand. What is this? The house. Your house, technically, though I imagine you don't want it. I had it assessed, valued, prepared for sale. But before we list it, I wanted to give you the option. Option for what? To burn it down. Elena looked up sharply. Adrian's expression was serious. I bought the neighboring lot 6 months ago. If we demo both properties, the combined parcel is worth significantly more. We could redevelop, build something new, or we could just destroy it and let the land sit empty. Your choice. You're serious? Completely. That house is a monument to everything Victor did to you. I thought you might want to see it gone. Elena looked back at the papers, at the address she'd once thought would be her home forever, the place where she'd been drugged and manipulated and marked for death. The idea of watching it burn was intoxicating. When? She asked. Whenever you're ready. They scheduled the demolition for a month later, after Elena had hired a team to go through the house and remove anything worth salvaging. She found almost nothing she wanted to keep. Victor's taste had infected every room, every piece of furniture. She kept her mother's garden tools, stored in the shed, and one photo of her parents from their wedding day, found in a box in the attic that Victor had never bothered to unpack. Everything else went to auction or donation or the dump. The day of the demolition, Elena stood across the street with Adrian and Maria, watching the crew set up. The house looked smaller than she remembered, less imposing, just a building, not the prison it had felt like. Last chance to change your mind, Adrian said. I'm not changing my mind. The crew gave the signal. The first wall came down with a crash that Elena felt in her chest. Then the second, the third, the entire structure collapsing in on itself in a cloud of dust and debris. Elena watched it fall and felt something inside her settle. Not healing, exactly, but closure. The final piece of Victor's control, reduced to rubble. How does it feel? Maria asked. Like I can breathe. They left before the crew finished clearing the site. Elena had a board meeting that afternoon, contracts to review, a dozen decisions waiting for her attention. Life moved on, even after the ruins stopped smoking. 6 months after the demolition, Elena stood in front of the entire company for the annual shareholder meeting. The room was packed, board members, investors, employees who'd driven up from the shipyard to see her speak. A year ago, she would have been terrified. Now she felt calm. She talked about the company's recovery, the new routes they'd secured, the sustainability initiatives they were launching. She talked about her father's vision and how they were honoring it while building something new. She didn't mention Victor. He was history now, locked away where he couldn't hurt anyone. The applause when she finished was genuine. Elena saw it in their faces. Respect, maybe even admiration. They saw her as a real CEO now, not just the heiress playing dress-up. Adrian was in the back of the room, watching with that expression she'd learned to read. Satisfaction, pride, possession. After the meeting, they walked to his car together. Elena had sold her own, couldn't stand to drive after everything that had happened. Adrian didn't mind playing chauffeur when their schedules aligned. "Good speech," he said as they pulled into traffic. "Thanks." Maria wrote half of it. "But you delivered it. That's what matters." They drove in comfortable silence for a while. Then Adrian spoke again, quieter this time. "I need to tell you something." Elena's guard went up immediately. "What?" "Remember when you asked if I'd been planning this from the beginning, using you to get to Victor?" "I remember you admitting exactly that. I wasn't entirely truthful." Adrian kept his eyes on the road. "I didn't just track Victor. I tracked your whole family, your father, specifically." Elena went cold. "Why?" "Because 20 years ago, your father won a contract that should have gone to my father's company. It was a big contract worth millions, and losing it bankrupted us. My father spent the rest of his life trying to rebuild, died before he could. I wanted revenge. On my father. On Moretti Shipping. On the legacy that destroyed mine." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I spent years positioning myself to take over your company. The plan was to wait until your father was vulnerable, then strike. But he died before I could make my move. The accident with your parents..." Elena's heart stopped. "What about the accident?" Adrian finally looked at her and his expression was hollow. "It wasn't an accident, Elena. I had their car sabotaged. I killed them." The world lurched sideways. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she was hearing. Her parents, the accident that had shattered her life, that had left her alone and vulnerable, an easy prey for Victor. Adrian had caused it. "Pull over." Her voice didn't sound like her own. "Elena, pull over now." Adrian pulled to the curb. Elena shoved open the door, stumbled out onto the sidewalk. She made it 3 steps before her legs gave out, before the weight of it crushed her down to her knees. Her parents. Her father's laugh. Her mother's hands in the garden. The way they'd looked at each other like the rest of the world didn't exist. Gone. Not because of bad luck or chance, but because Adrian Keller had wanted revenge. She felt Adrian's presence behind her. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't..." "Don't." Elena's voice was raw. "Don't you dare apologize. I need you to understand, you killed them." Elena spun around, and she was screaming now, all the control she'd built over the past year shattering like glass. "You murdered my parents so you could steal their company, and then you used me, you manipulated me, you made me think you were helping when this whole time I was helping. Everything I did to save you from Victor was real. Because you wanted to be the one who destroyed me, not him, you." Adrian flinched, but he didn't deny it. "In the beginning, yes, that was the plan. But Elena, you have to believe me. Things changed. You changed them. I don't believe anything you say. I don't believe a word out of your mouth." "Then believe this." Adrian pulled out an envelope from his jacket, handed it to her. "I had this drawn up 3 months ago. I've been trying to find the right time to give it to you, but there is no right time. There's just the truth." Elena opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a legal document transferring Adrian's entire stake in Moretti Shipping back to her. 22% equity, returned with no conditions, no strings attached. "I don't want your company," Adrian said quietly. "I don't want revenge on your father anymore. I just want..." He stopped, seemed to struggle with something. "I want you to be free, actually free, not bound to me, not obligated, not trapped in another cage." Elena stared at the papers, at the signature already notarized. "Why tell me now? Why not just..." "Because you deserve to know the truth. All of it. I've been lying to you since the moment we met, and I'm done. You should know exactly who I am and what I've done. Then you can decide what comes next. What comes next is I never want to see you again. I understand." Adrian's voice was steady, but something in his eyes looked broken. "The transfer is effective immediately. I'll resign from the board tomorrow. You'll never have to deal with me again." He turned to walk away. Elena sat on the curb, holding the papers that gave her everything she'd been fighting for. Complete control of her company, freedom from Adrian's influence, power that was entirely her own. And all it cost was the knowledge that the man who'd saved her life had also destroyed it. She thought about her father, about the stubborn streak James had mentioned. Enzo Moretti had refused to give up, had fought through impossible odds to keep his company alive. But he'd also made enemies, had probably destroyed other people's dreams in the process of building his own. There were no clean victories, no perfect heroes, just people making impossible choices and living with the consequences. Elena stood up, her legs steadier now. She looked at Adrian, at the man who'd orchestrated her parents' deaths and her own survival in equal measure. "I can't forgive you," she said. "Not for my parents. Maybe not ever. I know. But I'm not giving up the company, and I'm not going to let their deaths mean nothing." Elena took a breath. "I'm going to build something they'd be proud of, something that helps people instead of destroying them, and you're going to help me do it." Adrian's head snapped up. "What?" "You owe me a debt you can't ever repay. So you're going to spend the rest of your life trying. You're going to use your connections, your money, your ruthless talent for manipulation, all of it, to help me turn Moretti Shipping into something good, something that actually matters. Elena, you don't want me. I don't want you anywhere near me. But I need you. And you need to make this right, even if you never actually can." She met his eyes. "That's the deal. Take it, or I make sure everyone knows what you did. Your reputation, your company, everything you've built. I'll destroy all of it." Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, I'll do it." "And Adrian? If you lie to me again, if you manipulate me, if you ever hurt anyone I care about, I won't just ruin you. I'll end you. Do you understand?" "I understand." Elena walked back to the car, climbed in, waited for Adrian to join her. They drove in silence, and everything had changed again, and she had no idea if this was wisdom or madness. But it was her choice, made with full knowledge, full power, full understanding of exactly what she was trading. That had to count for something. The foundation launched a year later. Elena stood at the podium in front of reporters and industry leaders, announcing the Moretti Family Foundation's mission: supporting education for underprivileged students pursuing maritime careers, funding mental health resources for shipping industry workers, and providing legal assistance to victims of corporate fraud. Adrian sat in the front row watching. He donated half his fortune to fund it, no questions asked. Penance for sins that couldn't be forgiven, only acknowledged. They worked together, but they weren't friends, probably never would be. Elena kept him at arm's length, used his skills and resources while never forgetting what he'd done. Some days she hated him. Some days she understood him. Most days she felt both at once. Maria stood beside her on stage, now CFO of Moretti Shipping and the person Elena trusted most in the world. They'd built something together, the two Moretti daughters, something their parents would have recognized. After the presentation, Elena found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone. There was a message from the prison. Victor had tried to send her a letter. The warden was asking if she wanted to receive it. Elena deleted the message without responding. She had no interest in Victor's words, his justifications, his attempts to stay relevant in her life. He was the past, locked away where he belonged. She was the future, not perfect, not healed, not even close to okay most days, but free. Finally, actually free. Elena Moretti walked out of the event center into the Boston evening, her company secure, her mission clear, and her life entirely her own for the first time in years. She'd learned to see the monsters before they struck, learned to wield power without losing herself completely, learned that survival sometimes meant making deals with devils and living with the consequences. The woman who'd stood outside Victor's study, terrified and shattered, wouldn't recognize the woman she'd become. And that was exactly the point.